Let's talk about that weight. It wasn't just a number on a piece of paper, it was a noose, and it felt like it was getting tighter with every breath you took. For months, peace was a distant memory. Sleep was a stranger you desperately missed. You would lie awake, staring into the darkness, your mind a relentless storm of numbers, deadlines, and 1,000 impossible scenarios, each one ending in shame. And the prayers? You prayed with everything you had. You pleaded, you bargained, you cried out until your voice was raw and your spirit was exhausted. But the only response you got was a deep, deafening silence. It was a silence so heavy it felt like a final judgment, as if the doors to heaven had been shut and locked, but only for you. The sting of that abandonment, of feeling completely and utterly alone in your struggle, was a pain all its own. Every morning was a battle just to get out of bed and face the day. You had to wear a mask of normalcy while inside your stomach was a knot of pure anxiety. It was the humiliation of knowing your situation, the constant, gut-wrenching fear of what tomorrow would bring. That impossible obligation wasn't just a financial problem, it was a parasite, slowly draining the color from your world and the very life from your soul, leaving you feeling like a ghost walking through your own life. And while you were carrying that cross, the one responsible for your suffering was living a different reality. They moved through the world with an air of untouchable prosperity, their life built on a foundation of cold calculation and greed. They were the victor, and you were just a line item in their ledger. But the universe has its own way of keeping accounts, and the law of cause and effect is absolute. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, you started to see the balance shift. You began to notice it in small, quiet moments. The arrogant smirk that had once been permanently fixed on their face started to falter. It was replaced by a tight, worried line, a deep-set scowl that spoke of sleepless nights, nights that now mirrored your own. Their once reliable sources of income, the very wells from which they drew their power over you, had mysteriously started to run dry. You saw them in public, their posture no longer upright and commanding, but slightly stooped, as if they were now carrying an invisible weight of their own. You'd overhear snippets of frantic phone calls, their voice stripped of its usual authority, now tinged with a raw, desperate edge. The glow of affluence they once radiated had faded, replaced by a pale, haggard look. They were still wearing the expensive clothes, but the person inside them had shrunk. They projected an aura of scarcity, a quiet panic that they could no longer conceal. Their financial ruin wasn't just happening on paper, it was being etched onto their very being for the whole world to see. Look, let's talk about what happened, about the choice that set all of this in motion. There was a moment, long before their world started to crumble, where they stood at a crossroads. On one side was the path of integrity, of building something solid, even if it was slower. On the other was the shortcut, the path of cold, hard ambition. They chose ambition. That was their critical error. They made a calculated decision that your struggle was an acceptable price for their success. They saw your debt not as a human crisis, but as an asset on their balance sheet. Their entire sense of self-worth became tied to that bottom line, to the power they wielded over others. They convinced themselves that this was just good business, that empathy was a luxury they couldn't afford. But a foundation built on someone else's pain is built on sand. They thought they were constructing an empire, but all they were really doing was digging their own grave, one greedy decision at a time. And so the harvest began. It wasn't a sudden storm that tore their world apart. It was a slow, quiet drought. The universe doesn't always work in thunder and lightning. Sometimes it simply turns off the rain. The very things they counted on, the deals that always closed, the people who always answered their calls, it all just stopped. You saw it. You felt the shift in the air around them long before anyone else spoke of it. The swagger in their walk was the first thing to go. It was replaced by a hurried, almost frantic pace, as if they were constantly late for a meeting that could save them. Their face, once a mask of smug confidence, became a roadmap of their anxiety. You'd see them in their car, not on the phone, but just staring straight ahead, their jaw clenched so tight you could almost hear it. That was the look of someone doing impossible math in their head, trying to make the numbers fit a reality that no longer existed. The fear you carried for so long didn't just disappear. It transferred. It found a new home in them. It was in the way they'd flinch when their phone rang, the way their eyes would dart around a room,
searching for an exit, or perhaps for a threat. They were living in the very same state of high alert that they had imposed on you for months. The expensive suit was still there, the watch was still on their wrist, but it all looked like a costume on a ghost. The power wasn't in the objects, it was in the spirit, and their spirit was broken. This wasn't karma as a form of cosmic revenge. It was simpler. It was physics.
A structure built with rotten materials will eventually collapse under its own weight. Their empire was built on your sleepless nights, on your silent prayers, on your anxiety, and a foundation that weak was never meant to last. They weren't being punished by an outside force. They were simply living the consequences of their own architecture. They were tasting the bitter fruit from the tree they had planted in your garden, and they were finding it to be poison. And then, it happened. It wasn't a thunderclap or a dramatic revelation. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, a phone call, a letter in the mail. The details don't matter. What matters is the message it carried, a message so simple and so powerful, it felt like it rearranged the atoms in your body. It's done. It's paid. You are free. For a long moment, you didn't move. You just stood there, letting the words wash over you. The first thing you felt wasn't joy, but a profound, earth-shaking silence. The storm in your head, the one that had been raging for months, just stopped. The knot of anxiety in your stomach, a companion so constant you'd forgotten what life was like without it, simply dissolved. You took a breath, a real one, deep into your lungs, and it felt like the first breath you'd ever taken. The weight you had been carrying, the cross that had stooped your shoulders and hollowed your eyes, evaporated into nothing. In its place was a stillness, a peace so complete it felt sacred. You were standing on solid ground for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. It was later that day, as you were still navigating this new, quiet world inside yourself, that they appeared. Not with a threatening knock, but with a hesitant one. You opened the door, and there they were. The change was staggering. The last time you saw them, they were a monument to their own success. Now, they were a ruin. The expensive suit hung on their frame like it belonged to a bigger, more confident person. Their face was pale and drawn, the skin around their eyes a bruised purple from the very sleeplessness they had inflicted on you. They couldn't meet your gaze. Their eyes, once so sharp and calculating, now darted around, looking for an anchor in a world that had turned against them. They stumbled through a story of bad luck, of deals gone south, of betrayals. It was a narrative where they were the victim, a flimsy script they had clearly rehearsed. Then came the real reason for their visit. The ask. It was for money, of course. A loan, it called it. A temporary lifeline to get them back on their feet. Their voice, once a weapon of command, was thin and brittle. It cracked with a desperation that was utterly raw. In that moment, you saw them for what they truly were. Not a titan, not a predator, but a hollow shell, terrified of the silence where their power used to be. They were begging for you to fill that silence, to restore the old order where they stood on your neck to feel tall. And you, filled with the calm, unshakable strength of your new freedom, just looked at them. You looked them dead in the eye, and for the first time, they were forced to look back. There was no anger in your heart, no desire for revenge. That was their language, not yours. There was only a quiet, absolute certainty. You let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting them feel its weight. Then you gave them your answer. No. It was a complete sentence. There were no apologies, no explanations. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a closing, the final word in a chapter that had gone on for far too long. As you shut the door, you didn't feel a surge of victory. You felt closure. You understood, with a clarity that was a gift in itself, that the miracle you received was not a weapon to be used against them. It was a foundation. It was the soil, the seeds, and the water for your future. Your blessing was meant for building, for healing, for creating a life of peace that you had fought and prayed so hard for. It was not meant to be a bailout for the architect of your suffering. Their ruin was a structure of their own making, and you were no longer its cornerstone. You were free to walk away and build your own house, on your own terms, on solid ground, and you never looked back. Let's talk about the aftermath, about the quiet signs of a fall that continues long after the initial crash. You see, a collapse like that isn't a single event. It's a new climate, a permanent change in the weather of a person's life.
And you, from a safe distance, can see the forecast written all over him. First, you see it in his face. The arrogance has been completely sandblasted away, and what's left is something worn, tired, and deeply sad. It's the face of a man who has lost a war he didn't even know he was fighting. The sharp, calculating light in his eyes has been extinguished, replaced by a dull, unfocused gaze, as if he's constantly staring at a past he can't fix, or a future he can't imagine. The lines around his mouth, once etched by smirks of superiority, have deepened into permanent brackets of grief. He looks like he hasn't had a full night of sleep in years, carrying a fatigue so profound it seems to have settled into his bones. Then there's his behavior. The man who once took up all the space in a room now seems to be trying to disappear. He walks with his shoulders hunched, his head slightly down, avoiding eye contact at all costs. It's the posture of shame.
You've heard from others that he's become jumpy, nervous. He flinches at loud noises and is constantly checking his phone, not with the anticipation of a good call, but with the dread of a bad one. He avoids the places he used to frequent, the restaurants and clubs where his presence once commanded respect. He can't bear to be seen in his diminished state. His world has shrunk to the size of his anxiety, and he lives like a fugitive, hiding from the ghost of the man he used to be. Finally, there is the environment he now inhabits. Scarcity isn't just in a bank account, it's an atmosphere. The life he lives now is one of profound coldness. The vibrant, expansive world he once commanded has been replaced by a quiet, colorless existence. The friends who orbited his success have vanished, leaving a silence that is surely deafening. The vibrant energy of ambition has been replaced by the stagnant air of survival. He is living in the very world of lack and fear he once created for you. It's a quiet, lonely place, stripped of power, stripped of influence, and filled with the chilling echo of his own bad choices. He isn't just broke, he is profoundly alone, and that is the true measure of his ruin. Let's talk about the future, not the one you feared, but the one you built. Your new life didn't begin with a celebration. It began with the simple, sacred act of sleeping through the night. It began with drinking a cup of coffee in the morning without a knot of acid in your stomach. It was the return of small, forgotten joys, listening to music and actually hearing it, tasting your food, noticing the change of seasons. You didn't use your freedom to chase after the things he had. You had no interest in the hollow symbols of his failed empire. Instead, you invested in something he could never understand: peace. You started building a life on a foundation of integrity, one small, solid brick at a time. Your worth was no longer tied to a number in a ledger, but to the strength of your character, the quality of your word, and the peace in your heart. You learned that true security isn't about having an excess of money, it's about having enough, and knowing that what you have was earned honestly. It's a quiet, unshakable confidence that no market crash or failed deal can ever take away. And him? He became a ghost, a cautionary tale you hear about from time to time. He never bounced back. People like that rarely do, because their success was never built on real skill or value, but on leverage and intimidation. Once they lose their power, they have nothing left. He lives in a world of shadows, haunted by the memory of who he used to be. His punishment was not a single event, but a permanent condition: irrelevance. He was a man who needed to see fear in other people's eyes to feel alive, and now no one looks at him at all. This is the final truth of it all. The scales didn't just rebalance, they were removed entirely. His world was built on a flawed premise that your loss was his gain. When that premise collapsed, so did he. Your blessing was not just the removal of a debt, but the restoration of your own power. You were given back the pen to write your own story, and you chose to write a story of peace, of quiet strength, and of building something that lasts. The ultimate closure is this: you no longer define your freedom by his failure. His fate is his own, a closed loop of consequence he will walk for the rest of his days. Your life is yours again. The final victory was not in seeing him fall, but in realizing you had the strength to walk away and never look back, to build a future so solid and so peaceful that the memory of your struggle is nothing more than a distant echo in a life filled with your own light. And that is the quiet, final truth. The universe did not hand you a sword to seek revenge. It handed you a key to unlock your own cage. For so long, your life was a reaction. His call dictated your anxiety. His demands shaped your day.
His shadow fell over every moment of peace you tried to find. You were living in his story, and he had cast you as the victim. But when you looked him in the eye, devoid of the fear he had come to expect, and delivered that single quiet no, you weren't just refusing him alone. You were rejecting the role he had written for you. You were taking back the pen. You were closing the book on his entire narrative and walking off the set. Understand this. His power was always an illusion, a house of mirrors built on your fear. It was never his own. It was a parasitic strength, feeding on your anxiety, growing stronger with every sleepless night you endured. It needed your suffering to exist. The moment that suffering ended, his power source was cut. He is now left with what was always there beneath the expensive suit, an empty man rattling around in a hollow life. His true punishment isn't the loss of his money, it's the crushing weight of the silence where your fear used to be. It's waking up every morning and having to face the only person truly responsible for his ruin, himself. That is a prison from which there is no escape. Your wealth, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. It's not a number in an account, it's a feeling in your bones. It is the quiet confidence that comes from surviving the storm and knowing you can rebuild. It is the integrity of earning a living with clean hands and a clear conscience.
It is the simple, profound luxury of sleeping through the night. This is the wealth he can never comprehend, because it can't be bought, leveraged, or stolen. It must be forged in the fire of adversity and earned through character. It is a foundation of solid rock, and the empire you build on it, no matter how simple, will be yours forever. This is why the miracle was never truly about the money. That was just the catalyst. The real miracle was the restoration of your spirit. It was the clarity that washed over you, showing you that your blessing was not a weapon meant for revenge, but the tools and materials to build your own sanctuary. Your energy, your focus, your precious time, they are no longer being drained by his drama. They are now invested in you, in your healing, in your growth, in the life you are now free to create. He will continue to haunt the ruins of his own making, a ghost of his former self, but you won't even notice. You will be too absorbed in the act of living, of planting your own garden, of building a future so bright and so peaceful that the memory of his darkness becomes nothing more than a forgotten dream. And then, the moment will come. It will arrive long after the dust has settled, long after you've grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of your new life. It won't be a dramatic confrontation. It will be a simple notification, a vibration in your pocket that feels like an echo from a past you've already buried. Their name will appear on your screen. The message will be carefully crafted to sound innocent, perhaps a simple, "How have you been?" But you will understand its true purpose. It is a test, a hook cast into the calm waters of your life to see if there is still a connection, to see if the old power dynamic can be rekindled. It's an attempt to pull you back into their orbit of drama and need. And as you stare at those words, you will feel a profound and surprising clarity. There will be no jolt of the old anxiety, no surge of anger, not even a flicker of pity. You will simply see the message for what it is, a ghost rattling at a window of a house it can no longer enter. You will realize, in that quiet moment, that you owe them nothing, not your anger, not your forgiveness, and certainly not your attention. Any response, even a polite dismissal, is an engagement. It is an acknowledgement that a line of communication still exists. With a calmness that feels like the truest form of strength, your thumb will move across the screen. You won't type a reply. You will simply press block contact. It's not an act of hatred. It is an act of finality, an act of profound self-preservation. It is the quiet, deliberate cutting of the last thread. As their name disappears from your list, a final weight you didn't even know you were still carrying will lift. A single silent thought will rise up from the deepest part of your soul, not as a cry of victory, but as a simple, unshakable truth. I am free.